and we're going to be talking about Eric's book, Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, a roadmap for igniting high performance. Eric, great to have you with me. I just wanted to say a couple of things about your book. I read it and I really enjoyed it. The thing that you do, you work to enterprise, and what you do is you share so much of your experience there. And if there's anybody out there in leadership or thinking about going into leadership and want some ideas in terms of how to run a team, this is really a great place. This is not a up in the air theoretical book about culture. This is how I ran teams in enterprise, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work, and this is why it is. I mean, you could sit there and go read it, and if you're reading it, you go, right, I'm going to try that next at the next meeting, and then you turn it up, I'm going to do that at the next meeting, and that, I mean, it was like that. I mean, I really enjoyed it, Eric. Thank you so much. And where can people find you?
Yeah, well, Tim, thanks for the kind words. Thanks for taking the time to read it and gather some insights. But people can find me. LinkedIn is probably one of the easiest places. I have recently got on Instagram, so ClearPath Ventures _ you can go, and you can always email me at eric@clearpathventures.com. Probably the easiest place.
And where can I buy one of these?
You can go anywhere. You could go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a bookstore near you. One of the nice milestones I was fortunate to have is the Barnes & Noble infrastructure. Every state in the U.S., not every Barnes & Noble, but every state is carrying the book, at least
Fantastic.
A few.
So Eric, so what was the inspiration for the book?
Well, I've always been fascinated with business and sports and organizations that bring people together and do special things over an extended period of time. And I was fortunate to be with a large number of great teams and people. And it was a very competitive environment wherever I've been. But there was something that always stood out and let our team outperform some of the others in those core areas. And I wanted to share what that roadmap looked like that was applicable to a lot of different sectors. And so I wanted to try to share my message. Instead of leading teams of a few hundred, I wanted an opportunity to share the message with 10,000, 100,000, or however many I could impact.
I mean, what I get from the book is one of you have an understanding, or you have a drive to get high performance, and you always wanted to get the best out of your people. And there's so many anecdotes that you share about how you did certain things, and how you dealt with certain scenarios to try and get the best out of your people, because you can't always get the best, but sometimes there was an example of a particular employee where you knew that he was deemed as difficult, but you went out your way to actually to try and empower the person. And there was a couple of cases where, for example, you had a difficult client walk in trying to hire a car, and was particularly was shouting and stuff. And this employee, which was deemed difficult, just walked over and sorted the situation, and it went away.
Yeah, that story was actually pretty unique. It was with, like in any business, you have this surge that can come at you, and sometimes you're just not ready for it, and sometimes you're a little overwhelmed. And we happened to have a situation where we were very low on inventory, and this manager was able to actually use a company car in this situation. There were none left, and no one told him to do this, but he was willing. That's what, it's funny. You see the word above me, the belief. They had this belief about a common goal, and that's what's special about culture. So what do they do? Instead of searching and they couldn't find one, they hand the keys to their company car and was able to grab another one later on. So yeah, it's the special experiences that happen.
I remember once I was in Copenhagen in Denmark, and it was when a volcano had erupted and I couldn't get home. And I went up to one of the officials of the airplane company that I was basically trying to fly with, and they said, "We've got a hotel. All you need to do." And I said, "How did you get there?" And he said, "This is my ticket that I basically use to travel to get to work every day. If you go this, it's 2 stops. That's what you need to do."
It is the memorable situations. And that's why when you look at, this culture, it's the employee experience and the customer experience. And both have they're doubly weighted and very, very important. But those things extend and the stories grow. And then the customer tells a whole number of other people. So it's quite important that you create that.
In the book, you talk about the 5 factors of employee engagement. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were doing some research and trying to figure out, how do we continue to get our team excited about what they're doing and live those experiences we promise. And somewhere, I don't know where I even uncovered it. I wish I could give someone credit, but there were these 5 factors. And based on the stats, they said great engagement can lead to really good outcomes. Not all the time, but most of the time. And so one of the things, like companies would list their values, we use these 5 factors as a blueprint for a practical roadmap. And the 5 are, so the first factor was a strong relationship with your manager. And we wanted everybody within the organization to create this unique relationship, create the seeds of trust that go along with an organization. And so the first one was strong relationship. Second one was just clearly communications. Now, under that, of course, it gets very important that everybody within the organization is in alignment, from the new hire to the person who's about to retire. Everyone's in the synergistic approach. And the third was the right material, equipment, and information in order to achieve that desired outcome. Are we supplying them with the right tools that will allow them to exceed those customers' expectations? The fourth was really simple: personal and professional growth. Are you encouraging that? Personally and professionally. What you do inside hopefully helps them outside when they're at home, that integration piece. And then, of course, are you recognizing performance? So I always used to say, recognize the effort, reward excellence. And so those, in any organization, if you just find 3 initiatives under each one, it creates this little extra engagement level. And as we were stating, from all these companies that survey, it leads to really good outcomes in your areas. So it was crucial to the fundamental piece of what we were building.
And I thought that was one of the reasons why I felt that your book was so practical, which is that the strong relationship with your manager. This is not some sort of, we've done this report and we've got some fluffy thing that somehow that you're going to do, and you turn up and you do it, you think for 3 weeks, and then you go, actually, this isn't really going to work, and nobody. And I go to work and I talk to people about it, and I don't know what I'm talking about. Whereas a strong relationship with your manager, what is there not to understand about that?
Yeah, very simple, understandable, repeatable. And then you look at every step of so under relationship, there has to be a relationship built in the interview process. So, what are you doing within your organization to create this unique relationship, from the interview process to the offer, to the onboarding, to the initiative? What's the initiative within your organization that you utilize and can stamp and say, this is how we build relationships? We used to call it a 30 minutes of fame. And that was our way for the manager to deliver a one-on-one conversation, learning a little bit about them personally and professionally. And it's amazing what happens when trust and the word above me, belief, is there.
Because you talk about the recruitment process, and even in the recruitment process, you were building those relationships with the employee. It came across as, if I came to work for you, what I read in the book was I'm building a long-term relationship with a person and a company.
Not only was I involved in the majority of the interviews, because I wanted to understand who was coming through our doors. We would have a new hire lunch in which I would bring a pool of people together and literally just, tell me, Tim, tell me about yourself. What are the things that define who you are? What does work-life integration mean to you? Hey, tell me about a time, or whatever you were willing to share. But I really love to know the hobbies. What is enjoyment outside of the lines? And then all of a sudden you find they're a big footballer or a baseball fan of the Boston Red Sox, like I was. And when you bring that up, or you remember their spouse's name, and you're at a summer picnic, that matters. And so again, it's within the confines of what do you do as a leader all the way through.
Because you would actually organize dinners at your house where your wife cooked?
I would. We would. It was a way to. I wanted everyone to feel as comfortable as they could, not in a stuffy restaurant. And there's nothing wrong with going to a restaurant, but I wanted them to see my kids kind of running around the house, interacting. I kind of wanted to make it. I don't want to use the word family because that can get confusing in building culture. But I wanted to understand I was a person, and I wanted to be relatable, and I wanted them to meet my wife and my kids. So, and there was a lot of funny stories that happened that I actually shared in the book of what my kids would do, and those memories would become, as things go, legends grow. You know.
You also talk about hiring for match, not for fit, don't you?
I do. You know, the analogy would be, and some consider it semantics, but for me, I use it as a clothing analogy. You know, if I have a size 9 shoe and I'm looking for a size 9, that can be very specific. I wanted to hire as I was looking for the tie that would not only look sharp, but the tie makes the jacket stand out and the pants stand out. And so
as long as you're not colorblind, Eric, isn't it?
And I am colorblind to top it all off. Yeah. So according to my wife, the tie is important, right? So, you know, that's a little bit of the difference, the true diversity of thought, ethnicity, all of those things that, you know, you certainly don't want just to put a puzzle piece in. Maybe at times you might be, but that's not what I was looking for.
So just to digress, Eric tells a story in the book about the fact that he's colorblind, and his wife went away for 2 weeks. I can't remember where, but and the fact and what would happen is that if she doesn't basically tell him what shirt and tie and socks to wear, he turns up and he just doesn't know, and they're saying, "Why are you wearing?"
So I go. The funny story is I'm in a training class. And I think because normally, like you said, my wife tucks the socks in the suit jacket, and you know everything's ready with the tie. And I had 2 mismatched jackets, and I'm doing a training class, and everyone's giggling, and I'm like, "What is going on? I'm not that funny today." And I walk out for a minute. My executive assistant says, "Eric, you don't even match," and it was just one of those funny moments. And I'm like, "Why didn't you guys tell me? What are you doing?" They were laughing.
So how do you measure organization culture?
I think there's a lot of things you can do. I think the the qualitative version is just maybe the leadership role and presence. So for me, being involved in training classes, interviews, important sales calls to really get a viewpoint of what's going on within the organization, to really look for those, what they would call mood and artifacts. Are they carrying that championship belt for sales and they're proud of it, or is it in the closet collecting dust? So there's a few things that you would do as a leader. So it always starts with leadership presence. And then you look at where a little bit of the smoke signals, meaning you might have a summer picnic and the attendance is poor. You look at your 401k enrollment and things are low. People aren't signing up and believing in what you're doing. And so there's a few of those violations. Maybe it's ethical violations, all of a sudden spikes, lack of innovation. So some of those smoke signals are certainly important. But what I always look from a quantitative skill or a quantitative point were the customer and employee experience. So I called it engagement number 1, and then I called the customer satisfaction ratings of how we were treating our valued customers. And those would be double weighted. And so I actually looked at those very intently. We could make all the profits in the world, but if we're not doing it the right way, if our team isn't engaged, if we're not living the employee experience, if our customers don't recognize it, things are going to struggle. And then there would be 4 other little things from our inclusivity, our diversity, our retention. Of course, numbers matter. And of course, either profit or market share, whatever you're ranking. And so I created this 6 levels to check the health and a baseline of your organization. And so there are glaring signs. Engagement's the easiest. I think most people will look at a survey or a pulse survey or something like that. I tried to look at a whole sum of the parts because you do have to make some money too.
Because you talk in the book, don't you, about how you actually took these surveys and how you were measuring culture, and how it wasn't just about, I mean, you used the term there, smoke signals. It wasn't just about the fact that you were always engaging with people or making sure that the leaders that you were managing were engaging with people. You needed to have some sort of measurement that you were working to.
Well, yeah, I called them culture carriers. And those were the ones who would take the survey information and you kind of conquer and divide to your individual teams, because you could have different pieces. It's kind of like a basketball game. The first quarter could be different than the fourth quarter. And so we would use our culture carriers to take this, go back to the team to unwind it and get a good understanding of specific things, almost in like a subculture of the culture. And so engagement was a huge, obvious piece.
When you say culture carriers, what do you mean by that?
So it's really important. And I think a lot of organizations who are really good do it is, who are those voices? So it's great. Yeah, culture certainly could start with me as the leader, but that could get old quickly. And, organizations need to have I used to call them think tanks, where you're getting a cross section of your leadership team. I used managers who would be nominated by their peers to meet with me strategically and talk about the future, the vision of the particular place we're doing business. What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? And then utilizing that information, talking all the great feedback into our training classes, because we didn't want to just take the stuff and leave it, put it into our reviews. They were really the strategy, but they would go to their teams and they're doing the outreach. And, kind of in I think it's my upper left here, over here, you'll see the hourglass. The hourglass approach is really a place where that think tank or culture carriers would help. So the top of it is really the discovery piece. When you're searching, your sales are down, your service is down, something's up, technology's off. You're kind of reaching out to your customers, clients, stakeholders, whoever they are. And on the top of the hourglass, you're pulling all of this information to eventually where you're going to orchestrate as the hourglass comes out. You're pulling this into the eventual playbook. And as it comes out and leans in, you get your culture carriers to get those 2 or 3 things, 3 to 5 things, those initiatives where they roll the stuff out to their team. Very clear. And then they go outward and you're doing, like I was mentioning, the training, the reviews, the reinforcement that happens throughout your entire organization. And the bottom level is where you assess your culture. Engagement survey, pulse survey, or whatever you're doing. On each side, what's really important, Tim, is on one side, you have your policies and procedures that have to be designed when making decisions. And the other side are your mission, vision, values. Those are your guiding forces. Those are the things that are going to allow you to do the things the right way. And so that's what you hope your culture carriers are also doing, is conveying this information out. It's not just me, it's them. Better belief in the organization.
Because as you say, as a leader, you can say, I believe something like this, but it's really about empowering others to do that. And ultimately, as you say, empowering them to go out. And I love your, above you is your hourglass picture.
Yeah.
Where you talk about having your mission, values, and your policy procedures at either side. And then at the top, you've got your discovery. You then orchestrate and you start a rollout, and then you do a training, and then you do an assessment. So it's not just a case of I've trained people and then we assume it all happens. You've then got some feedback in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, the other key thing that was a nice visual and understandable, got to keep it simple, is the word hourglass. When you look at hourglass, it's O-U-R. There's hour in it. And it's not an eyeglass that, I don't know about you, but I've had since I was about 7, So everything, you want everything to just align and make sense. And so when they go within your organization, it's not a flavor of the week. It's very intentional.
I mean, we've all been to events that people have run where they say, well, we're going to have a brainstorm. And then you put loads of effort into it and they say, and then nothing happens.
I was recently talking to someone, they're in the healthcare space, and they actually had a great training on empathy. And so I started to ask questions. They said, hey, tell me how you get this acronym of EAR. It was a great little thing. And it was sent to them via some sort of webinar. And I said, how are you now taking that and how does it get disseminated to their team? And then it was like crickets. It's like, well, we're just supposed to do it. I'm like, really? You think everyone's going to, conceptually it makes sense, but we know life gets hard, things get challenged, things get moved around. And that's where organizations struggle. It just becomes a flavor of the week. And I wanted to be the distraction catcher for my team, that cognitive traffic cop that allows people to be at their best.
Eric, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture. As I said, I really enjoyed it. If I ever get into a position where I have to lead more people than I do right now, I'm going to reread it, because there's just so many things in here that you could implement. You know, it's like, as I said, turn the page. Yeah, I need to do that. Okay, so how do I do that? And turn the page. It's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the kind words.
You're welcome. And as we said earlier on, we can get a copy of this on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you get good books.
Absolutely. And matter of fact, if you really want to get put to sleep, you can listen to my voice, because I have an audible too. So it's not fantastic. A Morgan Freeman, but it's me talking. So
it's Eric Stone.
It is me. Yes.
Remind people where they can get hold of you, Eric.
So you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. Is probably the easiest place. ClearPath Ventures _ on Instagram. And you could just shoot me an email at eric@clearpathventures.com. Those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on, Eric, and sharing your wisdom and